Marcus had always found something comforting about that little diner on the corner of Maple and 3rd. It wasn't flashy, never pretended to be anything more than it was. Chipped linoleum floors, red leather booths patched with duct tape, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the late 80s. But it had strong coffee and peach cobbler worth every calorie, and most importantly, it was one of the few places he could sit without being Sheriff Whitaker. Here, to the waitstaff who had known him since he was a lanky teenager running errands for his grandmother, he was just Marcus. That night he had lingered a little longer than usual, savoring the rare quiet. The world outside, full of crime reports, press conferences, and political maneuvering, could wait until morning. When he finally rose from the booth, tucking a couple of bills under the coffee cup, the clock above the counter read just after 10. The town was already winding down. Streetlights hummed faintly, casting cones of amber light on mostly empty sidewalks. Marcus shrugged on his plain leather jacket, no badge pinned to it, no uniform to signal authority. For once, he allowed himself to feel like just another man leaving a diner on a cool evening. The night air carried the scent of damp asphalt, rain clouds having threatened earlier but never delivered. Marcus slipped his hands into his pockets, strolling toward his truck parked beneath one of the buzzing lamps. The streets were quiet, only the faint echo of distant traffic reminding him that the world hadn't completely gone to sleep. He was thinking about nothing in particular, maybe about the cobbler, maybe about the case reports he'd left on his desk, when headlights swung suddenly across the lot, too fast, too bright. A squad car screeched to a stop not 10 feet from him. The tires spat gravel, and Marcus instinctively squinted against the glare. His first thought was that one of his deputies needed him, maybe an emergency. But the way the doors slammed and the officers emerged, hands tense, eyes sharp, told him this wasn't a call for help. This was something else. "Hey, you, stop right there," the taller of the two barked, his voice cutting across the quiet night like a blade. He was white, buzz-cut, broad-shouldered, a man Marcus vaguely recognized but couldn't place. The other, leaner and younger, flanked him with the eager energy of someone desperate to prove himself. Their uniforms were standard issue, but there was nothing routine about the way they moved. Marcus halted, palms open, visible. Every instinct as a lawman told him to de-escalate, to avoid sudden moves. He had trained officers himself on how quickly assumptions turned deadly. Yet here he was, standing on the receiving end of that very training, stripped of its protections because tonight, without his badge displayed, he wasn't the sheriff. He was just a black man in the wrong place under the wrong light. "Is there a problem, officers?" Marcus asked, his tone steady, measured. Years of command had taught him that calm was stronger than shouting, that composure carried more weight than defiance. Still, he could see the way their eyes flicked over him, not listening, only searching for confirmation of whatever suspicion had bloomed in their minds. "You fit a description," the taller one said quickly, almost rehearsed, as if the phrase was a shield. "Hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here," Marcus replied evenly, holding them a little higher. His heart wasn't racing yet, but a heaviness settled in his chest. He thought of how many men who looked like him had stood in similar poses, insisting on their innocence, while the world refused to believe them. The irony, that the county sheriff himself could be mistaken for a suspect, was bitter enough to choke on. The younger officer edged closer, one hand resting on his baton. His partner's jaw was set tight, suspicion hardening into hostility with each second of silence. Marcus considered reaching for his wallet, for the badge inside that could end this whole charade instantly, but he knew better. Too sudden a movement, and it would be read as threat, not proof. Instead, he straightened his shoulders, meeting their eyes directly. "You need to think very carefully about what you're doing," he said, not as a plea, but as a warning. The words carried weight, though the night swallowed them before they reached the office's reason. The younger one smirked, glancing at his partner. "Hear that? He's trying to sound tough." Marcus kept his face unreadable, though anger flickered beneath the calm mask. He wasn't afraid. He had faced armed fugitives, violent standoffs, far worse than this, but the humiliation, the sheer wrongness of being treated like prey in his own town, lit a slow burn in his chest. The taller officer stepped forward now, closing the distance. "Turn around. Hands on the hood." His tone brooked no argument. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying himself, aware that whatever happened next would define the night, and possibly more than that. Behind him, the diner's neon sign flickered, casting faint pink light across the lot, as if mocking the scene about to unfold. They moved on him with the kind of practiced certainty that came from repetition, not reflection. Marcus felt the shove between his shoulder blades before he even had time to shift his stance. His chest hit the cool metal of the squad car's hood with a dull thud, the impact rattling through his ribs. One of them, the younger officer, pressed down on him with unnecessary force, while the other seized his wrist and twisted it behind his back. Marcus clenched his jaw, the pain sharp but controlled. He'd endured worse, but the indignity cut deeper than the pressure on his joints. "Got you now," the younger one muttered, as if Marcus were some fugitive finally cornered. The words were a script, not a thought. Marcus heard the eagerness in his tone, the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of capture. Except there was no chase. He'd been standing still, palms open, in compliance before they ever laid hands on him. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Officers, listen to me. I am not resisting. You're making a serious mistake." The taller one scoffed, yanking his arm higher until Marcus's shoulder strained. "Everyone says that. You think you're special." Marcus inhaled through his nose, slow, controlled. His years in uniform, his decades of training, his oath, they all told him not to lash out. He could have broken free easily. His frame was solid, his strength formidable. But that wasn't who he was, and any sudden movement could be the spark that set off a fire too dangerous to control. "I'm telling you," Marcus said again, voice firm but even, "you need to stop and think." That only seemed to irritate them more. The younger officer pressed his forearm harder into Marcus's back. "You need to stop running your mouth. We know your type." Those last words stung sharper than the grip on his arm. Your type. Marcus had heard it too many times before, sometimes muttered under breath, sometimes shouted across a street. Tonight it carried the weight of accusation and prejudice, wrapped in the armor of a badge. He wondered, bitterly, if they even realized how much of themselves they were revealing in those two words. "You don't know me," Marcus said, his cheek pressed to the cold metal. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "If you did, you wouldn't be doing this." The taller officer leaned closer, so near Marcus could feel his breath. "Why, you got some big shot lawyer. A politician cousin. Or you think just 'cause you're loud, we'll back off." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He thought about the oath these men had sworn, the same one he had sworn. To protect, to serve, to uphold justice without bias. He thought about the rookies he had mentored, the speeches he had given about integrity, accountability. And now here he was, treated like a criminal on the very streets he had worked to keep safe. "Answer me," the officer barked, jerking Marcus's arm again. He opened his eyes, fixing them on the reflection in the windshield. His own face stared back at him, half shadowed by the glare of the headlights, jaw tight but unbroken. "I answer to no one but the people of this county," Marcus said, his tone sharp now, a sliver of authority breaking through his restraint. The younger one laughed, short and dismissive. "You hear that? He thinks he's some kind of leader." Their arrogance was palpable, thick in the air, feeding off each other. Marcus knew it well. He had seen it in officers who believed the badge was a weapon, not a responsibility. And yet, he kept his body still, refusing to give them what they wanted: fear, anger, submission. His wallet shifted in his pocket as they pressed him harder against the hood, the leather edge nudging against his thigh. He knew what sat inside: the badge, polished and official, the emblem of his authority. One motion could end this charade. But the risk of reaching was too high. He pictured the headlines, the fallout, the grief on his community's face if this night went wrong. So he waited, letting silence stretch, until finally he spoke again. "You're both about to learn the difference between power and authority." His voice was low, deliberate, each word landing with weight. The taller officer tightened his grip but said nothing. The younger one scoffed again, though the edge of his bravado seemed thinner now, a flicker of uncertainty creeping in. Marcus sensed it, even in their stubbornness. The lot was quiet around them, the diner's neon still buzzing faintly in the distance. No bystanders, no witnesses, just the three of them locked in a moment that balanced on the edge of revelation. Marcus kept his gaze on the reflection in the glass, breathing evenly, holding his patience like a weapon sharper than any blade. He knew the truth would surface, and when it did, these men would face something far heavier than the weight they were putting on his back. The wallet slipped free as if the night itself had grown tired of the charade. It tumbled from Marcus's pocket, bounced once on the pavement, and landed open, the gleam of brass catching the glare of the squad car's headlights. The small, circular badge lay exposed, its engraving clear and unmistakable. The emblem of the county sheriff. For a moment, none of them moved. The younger officer froze mid-press, his forearm still pushing Marcus against the hood, but his eyes had already shifted downward, wide and uncomprehending. The taller one let go of Marcus's arm, blinking hard as though the truth in front of him might vanish if he refused to accept it. The night air seemed to still, the diner's neon buzz muted, the hum of the street lamps fading, until the only sound was the ragged breath of two men who suddenly understood how deeply they had misstepped. Marcus didn't flinch. Slowly, with deliberate calm, he straightened from the hood. He felt the tension in their grip falter, hesitation loosening the hold that moments before had been so absolute. He brushed the dust from his jacket with a composure that bordered on ceremonial, every movement a reminder that he was the one in control now. His eyes, when he turned them on the officers, were steady and unblinking. "You want to explain," Marcus said, voice low, "why the sheriff of this county just got slammed against a hood like a common thug?" The younger one stumbled back a step, words caught in his throat. "Sheriff. We didn't. I mean, we thought. You thought wrong." Marcus cut him off, his tone sharp as a blade. He stooped, picked up the wallet, and held it up so the badge glinted between them. "This is not just a piece of metal. This is authority. This is accountability. And tonight you showed you don't understand the difference." The taller officer, sweat beading at his temple despite the cool night air, tried to recover. "Sir, with all respect, your appearance matched a description. We were just doing our jobs." Marcus let the silence stretch long enough to make both men squirm. Then he stepped closer, closing the distance until they had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Your job," he said, each word deliberate, "is to serve. To protect. To treat every man, woman, and child in this county with dignity. Not to act on prejudice. Not to play judge and jury in a parking lot." Neither spoke. The younger officer shifted his weight uneasily, his earlier bravado collapsed into a hollow shell. The taller one held his gaze, but there was no defiance now, only the stubbornness of someone who knew the consequences waiting just beyond this moment. Marcus slid the wallet back into his pocket, his movements calm, purposeful. "Tomorrow morning," he said, voice steady as stone, "we'll see if you still wear those uniforms." The younger officer opened his mouth as if to plead, but Marcus raised a hand, silencing him. "Don't waste your breath. The people of this county deserve better than officers who can't tell the difference between suspicion and bias. You've not only disgraced your badges, you've endangered them." The headlights still cast harsh shadows across the lot, illuminating the stark truth written on their faces: fear, shame, disbelief. Marcus let them stand in it, let them feel the weight of what they had done. Too often men like them walked away from nights like this unscathed, their mistakes buried under silence. Not this time. As Marcus turned to his truck, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass once again. His jaw was still tight, but now there was something else in his eyes: resolve. He slid behind the wheel, the engine rumbling to life, and glanced once more at the two officers frozen in the glow of their own headlights. "This county chose me because they believed in justice," he said through the open window. "And justice is coming for you." He didn't wait for a response. He put the truck in gear and drove off, leaving them standing in the parking lot, two men suddenly aware that the power they had wielded carelessly had turned to dust in their hands. The diner's neon flickered behind them, casting pale pink light on their stunned faces, while ahead of Marcus stretched the dark road, a road he knew would lead to hard conversations, hearings, headlines. But he welcomed it, because tonight had proven, more than ever, why he wore the badge.